At the start of the year, I've talked about how 2024 would usher in great changes for the political landscapes all over the world because of Pluto in Aquarius. To recap, Pluto in Aquarius is very much about power returning back to the will of the people. To understand what that means or look like, it's very important for us to look at the previous cycle of Pluto in Aquarius, which corresponded to events like the French Revolution or the American Revolutionary War. Essentially what happened was that all obsolete power structures that are unrepresentative of the people fell. Power held by any one person or one faction gets diluted and get redistributed to a collective or an alternative. And interestingly enough, 2024 is a year in which a record number of elections are happening all around the world. Is it a coincidence? I think not. So let's take a look at some of the elections that has happened this year and what the results mean or say for Pluto in Aquarius. In Taiwan, the biggest theme for the presidential election was very much about whether the Taiwanese people are going to choose a pro-China party, a pro-China candidate, or a pro-sovereignty party and candidate. Especially in the context of China becoming more and more assertive around the issue of reunification as of late. And in choosing a pro-sovereignty candidate, it's very clear what is the will of the Taiwanese people. Meanwhile, Indonesia, the third largest democracy in the world, also just had their election. And the thing about Indonesia is that its politics have been, for many years now, shuffled around the same few families or political elites. In fact, on the day of the election, a friend of mine who has an interest in Indonesian politics actually told me that if the frontrunner wins, then it will be a change in political dynasty and power will be redistributed to newer blood rather than being closely guarded by a circle of a few families. In the end, the frontrunner Subianto did win and has pledged to continue the populist policies of the outgoing president. Meanwhile, in South Africa, the African National Congress has lost their parliamentary majority for the first time in 30 years since the end of apartheid, which means that they now have to form a coalition government, and this is something that has not been seen in the last 30 years. And this pattern of an incumbent party losing its parliamentary majority and having to form a coalition government is also reflected in the recent democratic elections of India. BJP, led by the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi, was expected to win a landslide victory, but they didn't. In fact, they have to strike a deal with rival parties in order to form a coalition government. As we look at all these results, we can see a familiar pattern emerging about Pluto in Aquarius. We see power getting redistributed, no longer lying in the hands of a few. We see more coalition government, which also means more diverse representation for the people. And we also see, like in the case of Taiwan, a desire to maintain sovereignty while resisting a greater power. And this is not too different to what has happened to America during the American Revolutionary War against the British. Now, let's look at some of the major elections which are coming and why we should watch them. After 14 years of being under the Conservative Party, polls have suggested that the next UK election will be dominated by the Labour Party. At the same time, smaller parties like the Anti-Immigration Reform Party, the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, they are all expected to make more gains during this election. Given the trend of Pluto in Aquarius, I guess the bigger question I have about the upcoming UK election is not so much of whether Labour is going to win, but if the major party that prevailed will lose its majority and the UK returns to a coalition government just like in India and in South Africa. The other major election to watch is the French election, not just because it is a snap election, but because the last time we had Pluto in Aquarius, we had the French Revolution, which gave birth to modern France. Since Pluto in Aquarius is all about people's power, it remains to be seen what that means in the French election and how that people's power is going to evolve for them. If President Macron's party is going to be trounced by Marine Le Pen's party, that means most of the country's domestic politics will be run by the far-right party, the National Rally, which would equate to more anti-immigration and nationalist policy. And I can't help but wonder whether this anti-immigration stance will be a prevailing ideology for the world in the next 20 years. And of course, one of the major elections to look out for in 2024 is the US election between Trump versus Biden. Given how crucial Pluto in Aquarius is for humanity in the next 20 years, This election would be very crucial as well, as we all know that whoever wins will really determine what the world's going to be like in the next 20 years. As The Economist puts it, America's presidential election in November will be less a popularity contest than a referendum on which candidate Americans think is the least bad option. Given how much influence the US has over the world, it is without a doubt that this election is going to define what Pluto in Aquarius is going to look like for the next 20 years. So if you're Americans, please consider the kind of world you want to build and choose wisely. In any case, Pluto in Aquarius is coming and is certainly shaping up new dynamics for the world.